Good morning and welcome. Thank you all for joining us here today to this Sustainable Survey webinar. I'm your host Vivi, and I'm super excited to introduce today's event. Later, you will meet Shilu and Dave introducing the speakers. Robert and Henrika are working behind the scenes to make everything run smoothly. We have a very interesting 2-hour program with 2 leading sustainable experts waiting to share their insight and knowledge with you, because we really believe the future of business is eco-friendly. Our goal for today is to provide some data and interesting perspective on the enormous challenges that we are facing with the global warming. Before we start, I will just briefly outline the program ahead. Each speaker will be speaking about 30 minutes, and after that we are going to have 10 minutes question time. After the first speaker, Juri Arponen, at 10:15, we are going to have 15 minutes break, where you can also test your sustainable knowledge with us in Fun Kahoot. After the break, we will continue with our second speaker, Niklas Kaskela. If you have any questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat below. During the event, we ask you to keep your microphone muted, but you can have your video on if you prefer so. So thank you again for tuning in, and let's start the show. Now I will give the turn to my colleague Shilu.
Hi everyone, hope you're all good. Thank you, Vivi. So I'll be introducing you to our first guest speaker, and also will be asking questions at the end. But first, let's watch this short video about circular economy.
Life is a circle. All that grows returns to where it began, the earth. And from there, it grows again, forming a perfect cycle. But we have broken that cycle. Our economy is growing unsustainably at the expense of nature. We have created a linear economic model. Make, use, dispose. We extract millions of tons of natural resources every year and turn them into materials that we use and consume. And then we simply throw them away. But what if we designed products that we can reuse, refurbish, and repair, and only extract new resources when we really need them? We would use less new materials and energy and protect our natural wealth. Inspired by nature, a circular approach would boost the European economy, contributing to innovation and job growth, as well as reducing pollution and helping the environment by preserving our precious natural resources. Carpooling, recycling materials, repairing and reusing, using green energy, Many things we already do are part of going circular. A circular economy is possible and brings new opportunities. And it isn't just good for nature and the economy, it's good for our quality of life and our health. A circular economy is a good way of living well within the limits of our planet.
Yep, so I hope that video gave you at least some basic idea about circular economy. And so our first guest speaker is Juri Arponen. He works as a senior lead in Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, managing a circular business program to help industries and companies to turn inefficiencies with circular business models. We are very lucky to have him here because not only he has 25 years of experience in business development, marketing, and financing, but also have deep knowledge on sustainability, sustainable business, internationalization, and innovation network. In recent years, he has been working with different industries and organizations to identify potential on and benefits on sustainable growth. So I would like to suggest all of you to pay attention because this is quite an opportunity to hear from Juri. So I'd like to invite Juri to take over the room. Yes.
Here. Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can see the slides?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so if I just start, thank you for introduction. It was very nice to hear. And I'm usually having too many slides, but try to hang on. I will be rather fast in the first half of the presentation, and then I will be slowing down when I talk more about the business models. But let's try to make this. And I have about 30 minutes, so because you never know what you end up speaking about, because sometimes I get so excited about this. But you hear me well. Show me the thumbs, Shilu, if you hear me. Very good. Okay. So let's go. Just some words about Sitra's Sitra and Sitra's role. It has been changed, of course, during when the society and the whole world have changed. We have made a trip actually from the end of 60s to this day, and of course the society and globe has changed a lot. So our role as a change maker and a think tank and a future house has changed also, from investing and R&D and such, very sort of close to businesses, and changing our economics and bringing those structures to Finland. We have now we are talking more about the societal game change, meaning that we have to change the whole society, not just some part of that. And you might, there is our future work, but the main things are actually circular economy, data economy, and the mega trends, and also that also comes with the foresight. And I think those are maybe the most biggest issues that we actually do. And some words about Sitra and the circular economy. I made the study for Finland in 2014 and 15 with McKinsey, and then we talked much about the potentials, and you can find the report from Sitra's page as well. But it usually, when you talk about the potential, they are more or less, when it concerns circular economy, you talk always about resource efficiency and closing the loop. So it's very close to the ecological industry, meaning like industrial symbiosis. But now it's more about also, and the main concern is to decouple the resource consumption from value creation. So how can you make value without using natural virgin raw materials? And that's a trick when the new when you are combining the new technologies like digitalization with this value creation, and I will talk much about that at the second half of my presentation. And then one thing which you may probably know, Citra, is this World Circular Economy Forum, which actually has been postponed this year's to the 2021, and that will take place in Canada. And there have been lots of such, we have been awarded of our work to enhancing the circular economy, not only in Finland, but globally. And my role actually is still, although I said that we are not so much anymore with directly with businesses, has been this industrial change, meaning mostly recent years with the manufacturing industries, and now we have also combined with this work also the chemical industry, and I will tell you more about that as well. And people are always asking, where are these examples and what are they? So you can find 124 in these from our website, for example. But there are a lot of in many companies who doesn't actually kind of realize that they do actually work along the principles of circular economy, but they don't really get it, that it's really that what is efficient and what is ecological, and although it might be very close to the regular business that they are doing. Nevertheless, and here is more about that, and this is what I'm doing actually. You can see on the right upper corner, you see we created tools for the companies and industries to make the change. So how you come up from the potentials and about this saying that you have to change now, so you need tools to do that. And so we have done that we have this growth initiative group which is SMEs 180 companies, and we have done their own workbook or playbook for them, and then the manufacturing industries and chemical industries, and this will be launched this week, actually, the chemical companies. And then I also work globally, and this on the left down corner you can see the it's a Nordic innovation. We have this ecosystem development program going on with them. So my work is actually inspiring business action, but it always involves the going deeper with these companies and changing their businesses, and it's a lot about the mindset. And this is, this is my daily work, but it's not just being on the stage. It's just a lot of work behind that usually. But as you can see, it's been rather global. So why we are doing this? We have to make the change, and we have to do it now. And my headline was something about road to hell or sustainable future. We have to decide, and this is the last times when we have to do something. But this is not a new phenomenon. As you can see, 2014 December, I'm also always watching for what the economist is saying about the world, because usually they are rather close to the right things, and this was already then, and it haven't been better, as you see the world how it is right now. But everybody's talking about also how about this ecological sustainability, but it's still there, and I think the urgency is even bigger, as we have seen. And I don't have to tell about this what is going on, but many times you just forget the thing that the population is growing and the demand for certain raw materials is already there. So we have also material crisis in many times because the supply isn't enough. So that's why we really have to change the way we are handling the whole system. And for example, I always take this phone because sometimes, those most enthusiastic ecological fighters, they also have the brand like Apple and everything. And many times it's kind of paradox because, this phone actually, the brutto, the gross weight on this phone is actually close to 3,000 kilograms. So it's not just the phone, that's much side material is losing when you are producing these phones. And also, it's not the only problem. Here you can see the connection of global production and supply chain. So that's a challenge. And when you talk about the responsibility and managing the supply chains globally, there are a lot of problems, and because you don't really know what is taking place there. And that's the challenge that these big companies are trying to fight for as well, along the ecological sustainability. Because Foxconn, it's kind of very challenging company, for example, with the problems they have with the suppliers and workers and so on. And the other example is just opening the eyes is the thing what is taking place of processing fish and canning, and there are still these kind of human slaves. So it's kind of very, very horrible situation. So that's something that the companies are trying to tackle, and as we know, the consequences of this population growth, like we see today about this epidemic situation. So this is not very easy task, but we can still fight against it and win the game. And I urge you to look out. This is very good publication. I think it was also published in Finnish, but if you want to see what is really behind everything during this decade, it's very good reading. So follow the megatrends, and you will see that the thing is also, and then we have these weak signals to go after, and nobody believed actually that this would be a case in Finland, that vegan food would be the mega trend of this century, but it is even in Finland, in all ABCs and whatever these fast food restaurants, and you can have it and eat it. And so you have to, even they are ridiculous sometimes, but these weak signals really show what will be the future. And the biggest thing is actually, these are the mega trends which you can actually order from Citra. You get it from our page, but the biggest thing is, your internet connection is unsustainable. Why? It's an ecological reconstruction, and that's what we really have to do. But one thing which I want to point out here is this relational power. It's also, it's a centralized, but it's also widening. You have a possibility to get your heard, and the situation with these two giants actually, but the other one is much more limited with the physical powers than the other one, the left hand side, but the relational power is almost as big, and tremendous changes she has been capable of running through. So this is something that is really that you have to work with, and also about the problems what we have with the internet and social media. One guy, which I don't know if you're aware of, but this is horrible economics, Viktor Lebov. As you can see, he was totally for the mass consumption and mass production. More we consume, the better we are with the economy. And now we can see that it's not only that way. We can create value with the decoupling that from the raw material use, when we are smarter and when we keep closing the loops. I hope I have a connection here. So, and these are also phenomena. I just wanted to point them out. So we have to be sustainable in all the dimensions, economical, ecological, and social. And you have to combine this solution whenever you do the business. Have always these in your business model. Yeah, that's just our definition, because there is always a debate and what is circular economy, what is not, and what we wanted to make a very clear and understandable and simple. So economic model is the model of the future in which natural resources are used within the Earth's carrying capacity. And I always like the former ambassador from the stage, Bruce Oreck, and he said that I liked it. We had some seminar some years ago, and he said that if Mother Nature would design a process, it wouldn't create waste. And that's the way we should do the things. Don't produce waste, not just trying to avoid it. So our role is actually also more to go towards strategic and combining all the players here in Finland, and that's what is taking place right now. There will be a strategic program starting next year, and now it's been building up, and it will be run by the Prime Minister actually Council, Prime Minister's office here in Finland, and that's the idea, enabling policy framework for this all. So it's cost, risk, and revenue what is concerned when you talk about the drivers for sustainability, and not only, like I said in the beginning, that it's not only resource efficiency, but it's also getting new markets and accessing new revenues. But above that, one thing which is actually missing here, it's sort of reputational, but it's purpose. Purpose is more and all the time there. And also European Union has a new Green Deal. I think you all know about this, but this is something that should be followed, because they already published the principles for the industrial policy, and also this circular economy, what was it called, action plan. So these two things is something that should be followed, and it's good that also these climate actions, data economy and circular economy are combined together, because they are all interacting and linked together. So as you know, all of these reports and all what Commission is doing, it's always when you think about the company side, they are waiting and what is it for us? And the problems have been also there, that where are these concrete business opportunities and what are they? What are the new service models? And that's why we created the playbook. And in many cases, you are waiting for, oh, now we are getting something new, like a paradise feeling, but you end up with the disaster because you don't really know what it's all about and you feel really confused. And that's why you have to have a clarity with your businesses and all of these new issues you are bringing in. It has to go along with your business purposes and idea and earning models. And this is what it's all about when we talk about the business model, how you can create, how you can change your present businesses and how you can start new. So that's why we created the playbook along this, and I will open up this to you later, but it's all about the opportunities, scanning the opportunities. What are the pain points, what we are causing our customers? Where are the inefficiencies in our linear business models within our value chains and ecosystems? And also, what are these unexploited customer engagements? And then you go for the capabilities. Can we handle this? No, we cannot do this alone. We need some other. What technologies can support us? What sorts of technologies are needed? How we make this transformation journey, and then you have more deep dives of industries. And that's not all. You also get tools to calculate the value which you are bringing. How much are the investment? What is the expectation for the return, and how much? And then we have this business model development toolkit, and I think this is the most essential part of this all. You are scanning and assessing what type of business model would assess those problems that you are facing or inefficiencies, or which are bringing you to new possibilities to get new earnings. So each of these business models that you are building up, you create your own business canvas and model. I will tell you a little bit more about this. So there are already existing global examples, which I think many of you have already followed, but one of the revolutionary, maybe most revolutionary, was this Michelin, who started with recycling the tires, but then they end up putting the sensor in the tire, and then they could sell it as a service. And once you get information from the road, from the driver, from the way he is using the truck, you can start to create new services like weather services, insurance services, road services, but everything you can imagine. And that's where they are aiming, from the tires to the new services. And these are already there, you know, remanufacturing and selling like airplane motors as a service. I have to watch my what. So we had these cases also in Finland, but what we didn't have was the SMEs. And the biggest driver to make the change and why this have been speeding up with last 3 years is the actually technological change. So sustainability with technology brings you the customer centricity. And what does it mean? Is that with the new technology, you can be much more efficient in your processes. You can predict, you can maintenance, you can optimize, and you can sell these services to your client. But above that, you can also handle, for example, the product that you have sold. You can now sell it as a service, and you operate remotely the engine or whatever the product is, and bringing the additional services. In that way, the life cycles are prolonging, and you don't need to build up new products during this, you know, as fast as possible, but concentrating on the customers value creation instead of that. So, and this is actually happening from the product to the moving ships and the fleets and so on. So I have more examples on that. And of course, these companies need technologies, new technologies to run it. So that's why they are also doing these mergers and acquisitions and have these corporate arms, which is doing venture capital. My battery is running low. Why is that? Oh, I have some sort of problem with my. Wait a second. Oh, I have some problems with my power. I hope that it's functioning. So let's be fast.
Yeah.
And then we have also these new platforms where you can. This is a portal of suppliers, and this is run by a company called Airfars. It was actually first Combi Works, which is a company who started to produce some components without investing its own factory or its own facilities or machinery. And by doing that, by creating this sort of huge platform with different suppliers, they can just optimize the production instead of investing to the new sort of building up a new greenfield factory. And in that way also this decoupling from the value creations from the virgin material consumption is taking place as well. And this the same idea is, for example, where the Cargotec is heading to is optimizing everything which is taking place in the ports, because as you know, this is very inefficient places because everyone have their own logistical systems, own tracking systems, and so on and so on. So this, they are creating this common platform for this. And this is also one type of sharing platform for everyone to be more efficient and more operationally more bettering their also the way of conducting businesses. So this is really happening in all industries now, this sort of huge change in this. And this was the point always when you start to talk about why should we do something and how we can manage that. And what is this, like we heard, take, make, waste, or take, use, and put it to the waste instead of how can we make it circular. And what the first question is, of course, always as well, this what is it for me, and how we can engage everybody on board. And that's why we had to show the the benefits, cost savings, revenue growth, strategic repositioning, the value for your customer, the purpose for your clients and the wider audience, and so on. It depends always what you want to achieve. Then you measure that and have an evidence that this is really happening. So circular economy, actually, these indicators are not just for the material or the environment, or meaning like an climate change. It's also very much to do with business performance, and that's also has to be, like I told you in the beginning, that you have to have also this economic sustainability, because this is something happening all the time with my, so I hope this is still running. So everything start with the business models, and that's why we started to engage companies when we did this playbook, from the big ones, and also huge amount of almost 50 SMEs. And now I think that this method which I showed you has been used by more than 3,000 companies, and not only Finland but globally, and that's why we also started to make this with chemical industries. And like I told you, it's very much about assessing the inefficiencies, checking out the pain points, what business model would be the most relevant. You assess that, and then you start to figure out. And this picture is one of my favorite, because it shows you this is the linear business model, and these submodels of these circular business models are making that circular. And those which you can see above are these new ones, which you can start to bring value by decoupling the value creation from raw material use. So those are also, many SMEs are building up those as well, because these which you see below, they started to be more or less more and more like a standard operational procedure. Everyone has something of these going on, and value is significant in all of these. I'm just going quickly. You can see these and read these afterwards. Benec, they changed their product design in order that to be more recyclable and prolonging the life cycles, but now they also have product as a service. They have a predictive maintenance in order to prolonging the life cycle. They changed the business model from not just selling the chairs, but giving a meeting room as a service. TAM Turbo selling air instead of the whole compressor, but of course you can still invest, you can lease it, but then you can only have it on your site and pay by the usage of the air you use. And you can find these examples in business playbook which we created. So it's not just anymore about the EBITDA, which operational efficiency. It's also about new offering, new possibilities, bringing new services, and which is very, very important is this brand value impact. And not only these business models are also changing the whole business ecosystems. And this is car industry where it's going to. You can see, for example, BMW is going towards this. You see the user face is in the middle, meaning like, what is it? Not drive now, but yeah, is it drive now? The car sharing that they have, and then they have, you can also lease the car. And then the prolonging that life cycle is coming more and more important. And the idea why is it also good business, because by the usage of one car you get many purchases per day from one car, instead of just selling one car for 10 or 15 years or 20 years like somebody's having that in Finland as well, because cars are so expensive here. So it's also good for the business, but it's good for the environment. And you can see the math here. It's more profitable revenue streams from ongoing services over one sales of. So you need all the players here. You need those who are linear, actually, and you are changing the linear with these new business models, but they don't usually do that by themselves only. They can remanufacture and recycle and have a take back programs, but then you need these specialized companies who bringing the new systems, and then you need these enabling companies who are make this all possible to happen. And this is just an example that we have with so I'm just showing you that companies are already doing, and they are all in different levels. Some are there just for starting, some are those who are doing the new business models, but though there are those who have embedded this all in their vision and operational model in their all functions and processes. And here are some examples. Nokia, for example, and how they explain that we run all our operations and develop our products using circular economy principles, and they measure everything what they do. So Orthex is one of my favorite because they build up their whole business based on the social development goals, and they are following those and also measuring them very well, and it's going actually very nicely. And one of good example is Konecranes as well. And as you can see, by maximizing the productivity of uptime, minimizing the cost of the downtime, you get the highest life cycle value, and then you are creating value from decoupling that from resource consumption. And digitalization is the thing. So we really have to change the way we are doing innovation, and we need new capabilities and technologies to do this. But also the financing models are crucial, because if you go from product selling to the service selling, you need to what you need is your balance sheet is starting to grow, and you cannot have it without having external financing or having an equity enlargement. So usually you need an investment into the company by yourselves or from somebody else. European Investment Fund, for example, has a possibility to invest in these type of business models. So there are a lot of barriers, not only financial, cultural is the biggest one. And what is happening inside our head, values, mindset, behavior. So we really have to change the culture of our industry and the way it's been handled. And this is actually taking place. This is happening. So it's very nice that we have so many examples. And you cannot do this by yourself. And now I'm finishing this because now my time is about to run out. But I'm just saying that, for example, Haaga-Helia and you have also a very important role to bringing these new ideas first to the students, but then bringing it out to the companies, because no one can do this by themselves. Everybody needs help and support from someone else and new partnerships. Now, this was like a horrible half hour, but I hope you survived. So just to complete, the circular engagement maximize customer value, attracts investors, and create sense of purpose. So customers, investor, people, and somebody else like profit, people, and what was the one? Planet. So it's almost the same, but this is really, really true. It's not just a nonsense. So thank you very much for your.
Yes, thank you, Yuri. So, can you hear me? Yeah. Are you still there, Yuri? I think something went wrong with. Yeah, I think something went wrong. I think his mobile power went off or something. Just a minute.
Yeah, it seems that Yuri left now. So
Yeah, but it was kind of, I think something went wrong with his phone or internet.
okay. Just a few seconds, we try to contact Yuri again. Meanwhile, I think we can move on to the next part. We were supposed to have the questions now, but we are postponing now those for a few seconds. And we are going to start our break now. So you can now grab a coffee, check your WhatsApp or stretch your legs, but don't go anywhere if you want to test your sustainable knowledge with us, because we are going to have fun Kahoot. All of those who want to join us. Few seconds and we set it up.
I have Yuri just called me. Sorry for the disinterruption. His power went off. Mobile phone's turned off. So he's trying to reconnect again. So we will have a break and then we can have a question answer round.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Thank you, Shilu. So now we're going to have 15 minutes break. So you can leave if you want to, but don't go anywhere if you want to join us in Kahoot. We will start the Kahoot now. And all of those who don't know what Kahoot is, it is this online questionnaire game where you can test now your sustainable knowledge. So grab a phone, you can do the Kahoot by WhatsApp, or then in the, the app or in the website. The Kahoot code is here, but the code can be found also in a chat. For technical reasons, the Kahoot might be slow or it might throw you out from the game. So we are sorry if that happens, but the Kahoot code can be seen all times during the game, so you can re-enter if that happens. We are also going to shut down your cameras if it's on during the game, so it will run smoothly. We will wait a few minutes so everybody can join us. If you want to join, a few minutes more and then we start. Is everybody in who wants to join us? I hope so. We are gonna start now. And we have the winner. Congratulations, Penny. Second place, Sophie, and third place, Ari. I hope you all enjoyed this. So yes, we are going to now give 5 minutes break. So 5 minutes before 11, we will continue back. So enjoy your break now.
hello everyone, and welcome back. So Yuri is back with us. His mobile turned off. So first, we will start the question answer round now, and we have few questions in chat. So I will read it out to you, Yuri. Yuri. Sorry, just a minute, guys. I think he's trying to connect. He's connecting right now.
Just a few seconds and we are trying to figure it out so we can ask the questions for Yuri.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. I don't know. I
No
lost
problem.
totally power from my laptop, so now it's back.
Yeah, that happens. Yes. So yeah, I will read out the questions that we have in chat box.
Okay, I try to answer something.
Our first question is from Sophia. What is your view on individual versus corporate responsibility regarding sustainability? Also, is it up to the consumer to reduce consumption or up to the companies to provide solutions? How would the economy react to optimal sustainable living?
Yeah, I think it's both. We need all, and also the like we put it, we need also the governance to stop the stupidities in some legislation. For example, in some cases, the more sustainable solution is not approved by some authorities. That's also a huge problem. But of course, consumers are the key. And I believe in market economy. Of course, it has its weaknesses, but it's still the best solution so far. And that's always come from what is the demand, and demand, it's about customers and consumers and companies together find the solutions. And now more and more it's going towards, even in Finland, that people don't want to buy so much and such things. But and then there are still some these stupidities with us, although some daily shops, for example, they say that we are very sustainable, but then they give you a bucket in the morning and everybody's queuing for that. Ämpäri. That's some sort of Finnish sickness. I don't know why we are so heavily want to have new buckets every day for our households. That's just an example of, I think, people tend to forget suddenly, but now it's coming more and more. Even, you couldn't imagine like 2 years ago that the main frame in the advertising is about the climate responsibility and also about some part of circular economy you can see as well. You couldn't see that. I was in ad business like 8 years, 9 years, and those days it was mainly kind of very close to greenwash. But now it has changed because you cannot fool anymore. You cannot lie because everything will be out in the morning next day that they lied. This was not sustainable. So I think we need both. You cannot just think about the one. You need these both to work together, consumers and companies.
Yes, true. And so we move on to next question. It's Soili Kallinen says, thank you for the great presentation of circular economy. You saw that all business sector to cooperate. We need SCM, marketing, finance, etc. to do together business. in Haaga-Helia, we have started new course of circular economy. So it wasn't really a question, but she was kind of appreciating for your presentation.
Very good.
Sorry, here is Soila Kallinen online. So I'm a senior lecturer of supply chain management. I wanted just to thank you of this view that you really need to kind of provide many angles, not only supply chain management, but the marketing has a crucial element here as well. I have another question that could be read on the chat. It was just a continuing sentence that I wrote it in another chat line. So
yeah, go ahead and you can ask the question.
yeah.
If you have
So how do you
yeah.
see opportunities to improve transparency in the global supply chain? Because one principle of circular economy is to know the origin of the material when it circulates. So has that been kind of discussed globally?
Yeah, it has. This is. I was actually in. Was it 2 years ago in where I was? Oh yes, MIT, and it was a sustainable business strategies course in Boston, and this was one. You know, we don't maybe open up this so much in Finland as they do in many other countries and globally about this transparency in the supply chains and global production and such. But it's now it's coming. What is now the trend is that they are bringing in these sort of partnerships, and instead of just giving the management tools or a different type of what is it now? It's a Monday head, so we cannot remember all the words, but it's you know, this quality management issue instead of opening up that. And we have in Finland we have these FIBS, which is the Finnish a sort of group for sustainable. I think we've been working or at least discussed a lot about this supply chain issue and more responsibility in that. And I think that's something, if you want to go further, we are about to start a masterclass with that group, because I think they have like 300 companies there and many, all the big ones are there. So it would be good. We could continue this discussion. Actually, I would be more than happy to discuss you more about this, because usually you don't discuss. So we don't have too many groups or people who are talking about business way in circular economy. But I think the tendency is now towards that. But this is very, very good and important issue as well.
Thank you very much. I would very much like to cooperate with you, because we have a specialization studies that could actually touch this topic. We have circular economy courses and sustainable SCM courses. So thank you for this good overview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Soili. And let's move on to the next question. Well, thank you for your great presentation. What is your thought for current situation, COVID-19, and its impact in sustainable or circular economy?
Actually, you have seen the straight implications, for example, towards the climate change. In many cases, the waters of Venice have been never this clear as they are now, and in many cases where you don't see cars on the street and factories are functioning. That's somewhat, but like I said, the circular economy work is going very, very widely now, and despite this COVID, I think it's the opposite. People have also realized that you cannot treat our earth as you have done, and these questions of responsibility and sustainability are raising more and more. And also the and of course you saw also that for example, this remote working, it was about 1 million people, for example, in Finland who suddenly stayed home to work and half of that people don't want to go back to normal, so-called normal. And where does it end up to is that you are using less consumption, less of material, and you are polluting less. But no, it's ongoing work, and European Commission have launched this Green Deal, and the whole Europe is now figuring the ways that they start to implement those within their countries, and new industrial this policy and circular economy action plan, and those all, and also, for example, actions launched circular economy handbook in Davos and so on. So and we have this program going on, and people are very enthusiastic to join. So of course it takes some time, because there is much to do with recovering of companies, and setting up the businesses in order way, in proper way, and such. But it's coming after this urgent needs and some desperate situation that there are with the peoples and countries and companies. After that, I think this will be more and more on the table of everybody in the management and boardrooms of every company.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see any indications. I'm always saying that you don't have to believe in this. I'm just showing that what the leading companies are doing. And when I talk about the leading companies, I'm not just meaning the big ones. I'm also meaning the small leading companies, because and some people are coming to me and say, hey, Yuri, circular economy can be the business as well. I'm saying that that's the only business. You cannot afford to do any other way.
Yeah.
Although and the one thing is also, people have some sort of misunderstanding that of course some businesses have the key business idea is with the circulation, for example, of material, or reusing, or purifying something, or doing those. But some people are changing their way of conducting business, but it's not always that the business surrounding is very close to the material, sometimes not at all. But still you are doing that in very sustainable way, and when you combine all your business ecosystems, there are functions that are making your business possible to be immaterial, and linking these material circulations, they are there behind. But for example, I don't know if you know, Repack is a rather small company. Everybody usually knows that. When you can bring your package back, your shipment package from back, and they purchase, you get some money back as well. So and Jonne Hellgren, who is CEO of this company, he's saying that we operate on the principles of circular economy, but our business is e-commerce. So that sort of issues is happening, and people have to understand what is their business and how they operate. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm.
Yeah.
Don't ask me questions, because I'm always talking like
No, it was
many
very
hours.
interesting to hear you. Yeah. So I guess that was our last question for
Very good.
today's session. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if
Thank
we
you very
had
much.
time, we
Good
could
questions.
have asked a lot of questions. Yes.
Very nice.
Thank you so much, Yuri,
Thank
for
you. Thank
the
you.
very enlightening and insightful presentation.
Thank you.
Have a good day ahead.
Thank you too. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
And thank you, Yuri. Now we are going to continue with our program and with our next speaker. So I will give the turn to my colleague, Dave.
Hello, everybody. So our next speaker, his name is Nicholas Kaskiela, and he's a sustainability expert who's worked as a lobbyist for climate change, consulting politicians and industry leaders. He's president of the Finnish chapter of Protect Our Winters, which is a small group of climate influencers who specialize in outdoor winter sporting activities. He's now head of the sustainability at Compensate, which is a Finnish non-profit company that sets up a carbon tax that companies and individuals can buy to offset their emissions. So please welcome Nicholas Kaskiela. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your insights on how we as business-minded students can start implementing some of the changes needed going forward in a sustainable way.
All right. Hi there, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Dave, thumbs up.
Yeah,
all right.
good.
All good. Great. So let me just share my screen and I'll start my presentation. Thanks for the intro and kind words. Let's see. Here we go. Are you able to see?
Yeah.
We go to this first slide. Okay. Yeah. So thanks everyone. My name is Niklas Koskela. As Dave mentioned, I'm head of sustainability at Compensate. I could say that I've been a climate activist for more than 10 years. So I pretty much work with climate issues both in my professional job and my spare time. And yeah, I'm going to talk more about what Compensate does and the climate crisis that we're facing currently and what kind of solution we have to it as an example of how sustainability can be integrated into what companies do at the moment, and also touch a bit upon the question that somebody raised earlier, that what kind of role does individual choices, what kind of role can they have in mitigating the climate crisis, and what sort of role should companies have, and touch a bit upon the previous presentation as well. But if we move forward, I'm not going to talk too much about like the effects of climate change, or actually I try to call it the climate crisis. Climate change sounds like a neutral thing that just happens by itself, but climate crisis may be more descriptive of it. And we have to remember that what's causing climate change, it's not a natural phenomenon. It's something that we humans are doing actively, and our actions are changing the climate. But I would say that climate change is the number one issue of our generation, of basically the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced. It might even pose, if things get really out of hand, it might even pose an existential threat to humanity. So I think tackling climate change has to be the top priority of humanity and everyone. But let's not go into too much details into storms or floods or disasters, because I'm pretty sure everybody taking part in this course is well aware of that. But instead, let me focus maybe more on sort of what has prevented us from taking climate action and where we are right now. Like Dave mentioned, I've been working in different roles in the climate movement for a long time. I used to be a lobbyist for different environmental and development NGOs, trying to push politicians to take more urgent action on climate change. We didn't see very much, a lot of things happening on that front, to be honest. Now I'm trying to work with companies, and maybe there's more things going on there. But I think one reason why we haven't really achieved too many results thus far is that climate change we basically have an issue that concerns all of us, but nobody really wants to take responsibility for it. If you think about politicians, they're very good at blaming someone else always. If it's a Finnish politician, they might say that, hey, it's the big polluters like China or India or the US who have to do more. We're just a small country. If it's consumers, they're saying maybe, hey, we're just buying whatever companies are selling to us. It's not our responsibility. While companies might say we're just, creating or providing what consumers want, and it's the consumers who should guide us towards more sustainable direction. So basically, we somehow lack kind of the core idea that we're all responsible for the climate. Like imagine, if you can imagine like the climate or the atmosphere as a dump site, where we all kind of just collectively add our CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions, except that it's an invisible dump site, so we can't really see that it's already overflowing and causing all kinds of damage. But we just keep adding stuff up there without taking any responsibility. Basically, every one of us on this meeting is constantly adding every day more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And one reason why we're not taking responsibility is because we haven't had the tools or the means to do so. I'll go into what Compensate offers in that sense a bit later. And then there's a misconception that we're actually achieving a lot on the climate front already. And I don't want to be like too pessimistic, but just to give you some numbers and facts, that global emissions have pretty much gone up all the time since pre-industrial times. In recent history, we've only seen like maybe 2 occurrences when global greenhouse gas emissions have actually gone down. One was the fall of the Soviet Union back in the early 90s, and then the second one was during the financial crisis of 2008. And in both periods, the downturn of global emissions was only about 1%. So no significant change really. And the curve has just, all other years it's gone upwards. Now we're predicting that due to COVID-19 and the Corona crisis, we might even see like up to 5% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions, which would be very significant. It would be the biggest reduction we've seen in a long time, even bigger than during the Second World War. So pretty much the entire world is closed down, but we still achieve only a 5% reduction in emissions. So again, that sort of says that we have a lot of kind of with like the structures of society are built in a way that it's difficult to get rid of all the emissions. But anyway, 5% reduction would be a good achievement. However, that's still very far from the emission reductions that we would need to achieve in order for us to achieve the goals set in the Paris Agreement, which almost all nations on the world have signed. So the Paris Agreement says that we should try to limit our global warming to 1.5 degrees. We're currently just above 1 degree since pre-industrial times. And in order for us to reach the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees, we would actually need about 7.6% of emission reductions every year for the next 10 years. So now the world is pretty much closed. Corona, the COVID-19 crisis, is maybe causing a 5% reduction in emissions. We would need bigger reductions every year for the next 10 years for us to have any hope of reaching the 1.5 degree goal. So that gives you the scale of the climate challenge that we have ahead of us. But talking about like percentages and greenhouse gases is always a bit abstract. So let me put that into a more kind of personal or relatable perspective. An average Finn has an annual carbon footprint. That means the annual one average Finn causes how much greenhouse gas emissions the life of one average person causes. So an average annual carbon footprint of about 10 tons of CO2 equivalent, carbon dioxide equivalent. So in order for us to, for Finns to be living in sort of a lifestyle that's compatible with the 1.5 degree goal, we need to reduce our carbon footprint by about 75 to 80% within the next 10 years. So we need to go down from about 10 tons of CO2 a year to about 2.5 or even 2 tons of CO2 a year by the end of the decade. Now, 2.5 tons of CO2 is, you can, just barely maybe take a holiday on the Canary Islands, and the flights there and back would be about 2.5 tons, 2 tons approximately. So basically that would mean that you would use all the emissions that you have for 1 year with just one holiday trip. So that gives you the scale of the change that has to happen also on a personal level or on an individual level. It also shows you how damaging flying is, obviously, as well. But anyway, I believe, and we believe at Compensate, that we, if individuals start to take responsibility for their climate, for the damage that their decisions caused to the climate, that will also lead to bigger change. If you think about institutions like companies or cities or municipalities, governments, they're all made of people, individuals. And if people don't have that sense of responsibility on an individual level, it's quite hard to achieve that on an institutional level of abstract institutions like companies taking responsibility. So it starts with the people, and people need to take to be responsible for the climate as well. So what's the reason we have the climate changing? It's because we have too much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We have added carbon dioxide, and we keep adding it all the time. Some might think that now, because of the COVID situation, that amount of carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere is going down, but actually it's still going up. But it's going up maybe at a slightly lower rate, about 10% less of a rate than it used to. So even a very small change thus far. We don't see the effects of the COVID crisis in the atmosphere quite yet. But we've added way too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere already. Let me think about it like if you would imagine that the atmosphere is a bathtub, and the water inside the bathtub is the amount of CO2. So if the water is at a safe level, it doesn't splash over, and that was pretty much the situation, before before pre-industrial times, when the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was about 250 parts per million. That's the way you measure the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So now we're getting close to around 420 parts per million. So that means if you imagine the bathtub again, it's already overflowing. And it's overflowing, and it's causing all kinds of damage. But sort of our solution to climate change hasn't been to turn off the tap. We're still adding carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Our solution is just to kind of slow down a bit the flow of water from the tap to emit less. And that's really, if you think about it through this metaphor, you understand that we need to really radically and fastly move towards shutting off the tap completely, so that we're not adding any more water into the bathtub, so that we're not adding any more CO2 into the atmosphere. But however, even if we would do that, there would still be too much water in the bathtub. We would need to drain some of it out. So the same applies for the atmosphere. Even if we could achieve zero emissions, we would still have too much CO2 in the atmosphere, which would cause the temperatures to continue to rise and climate change to move forward. So we also need to sort of take out the plug on the bottom of the bathtub and drain some water out. And when it comes to the climate and the atmosphere, we need to systematically remove excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So the primary way and the most important way to solve the climate crisis is to radically reduce emissions and to achieve a zero emission world as soon as possible. But we've surpassed the point when that's simply enough. Often 300 parts, or it's said that the kind of safe level of CO2, which would be like about 350 parts per million, that level was surpassed back in 1987. So we need to go back a few decades, and that would be kind of the safe levels where we could continue. So radical emission reductions are necessary, but in addition to that, we also need to remove excess CO2 from the atmosphere. I'll go into detail a bit further later on how Compensate can provide a service that helps us achieve that. But even though I might have sounded a bit pessimistic in the beginning and sort of painting the big picture of how big the change that needs to happen is, but at the same time, I'm also optimistic because I've never seen sort of so much going on in terms of people's awareness growing, companies' awareness growing, even politicians taking action that they maybe didn't do, not in every country, obviously, but in a lot of places. And yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think like one turning point was the 2018 IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Climate Panel on Climate Change released a report on what it would mean for us to achieve a or to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And that report really woke us up in many ways, and woke up businesses as well. And I think at the moment, businesses especially are taking the lead. It's more sticky sort of on the political front to get things happening, but sort of businesses that maybe a decade ago or even 5 years ago were the sort of were putting the brakes on in terms of more ambitious climate action. Now they're actually in many ways the ones that are driving more ambitious climate action. It's maybe the politicians that are putting a brake on it, and politicians doing it basically because of fear of reactions from the voters, for example. And I think that's a slight misconception that that voters would not want climate action. If you look at polling about, for example, in Europe or in Finland, vast majority of people want more climate action and more ambitious climate action. So I think it's that public support is there. It just needs we need some political will to get things happening. But anyway, businesses and consumers are definitely pushing towards more sustainable consumption. So now let me go into what compensators and what we can do, or at least in part to solve this climate crisis that we have. So we're a Finnish nonprofit. We have a mission to change or to mitigate climate change by offering people ways to offset emissions of their everyday lives. So we put a price on carbon basically, and that's our way of making visible the climate impact our consumption has. The goods, our services we purchase all have a climate impact. And we put a price on how much it costs to kind of clean up after our mess. And that will guide and empower consumers to choose more wisely. But then we also offer a service where you can offset the amount of emissions that your purchase or your consumption has causes. And we don't only offset it, but we actually remove more CO2 from the atmosphere than the consumption of a service or product has cost. So we have a so-called overbuilt overcompensation model, which means that we're actually helping people achieve not just carbon neutrality, which would mean that emissions and CO2 reduction are in balance, but actually carbon negativity. So again, we're still some way away from a situation where we would have a zero emission world and kind of where our lives and our consumption wouldn't cause any damage to the climate. Maybe I can use myself as an example. If you remember that the average Finn has a carbon footprint of about 10 tons of CO2 annually. I've been able to reduce my personal footprint to around 4 tons, which is, obviously less than half of the average Finn. I still live a very comfortable middle-class life. I have 2 kids and a car and a house and all that, but still through some choices like the electricity we use, the fuel we have in our car, we don't fly, we eat or mostly vegetarian food and all that. So these individual choices can actually reduce personal carbon footprints by huge amounts. But still, I'm causing over 4 tons of CO2 emissions every year. And if you remember that sustainable level was about 2 or 2.5 tons. So I'm still double to that kind of sustainable level. Going down from 4 tons is quite difficult. That would require, maybe that I'm kind of off grid, for example. I can't really affect the way my district heating is powered in Helsinki, for example. So there are very many of these kind of structures in society that prevent me from reducing my emissions even further. So I need ways basically of taking responsibility for these CO2 emissions that I still cause. I'm adding every day more of CO2 into the atmosphere, thus speeding climate change, even though I've been able to reduce my emissions quite significantly. So basically, with Compensate, I'm able to offset my emissions, and it also helps me to kind of recognize where my emissions are still. For example, if most people are familiar with offsetting through, for example, offsetting flights or emissions from flights, that's been the most common use maybe in the past. And quite often it's required that you maybe book your flights and you buy your tickets, and then you go to a third-party website afterwards and insert your route and what type of airplane you're using or whatever, and then it calculates the emissions of your flight, and then you happily offset your emissions. But that doesn't really affect the consumer choices that you make, does it? You're kind of doing it too late. You buy something first, and then you kind of pay for your sins later on. What we're doing is we're designing a service or implementing a service where the climate impact of your decisions is where you're informed of it already prior to purchase. And this is really important, because if you do that prior to purchase, if you see the price or the damage that you're causing the climate already before you make a consumer choice, that still has potential to shift your consumer decisions to more sustainable ways. For example, if you're looking at flights, you might want to, if you absolutely have to fly, first of all, if you could always take a train and then maybe not have to offset anything at all, but let's say you just have to fly, you might want to take a direct flight, which would be probably compared to a flight where you have to land and depart again, would mean maybe a 40% reduction in the emissions of the trip. So having that knowledge prior to purchase is super important, and that's where we're designing and implementing something that others haven't done yet. So knowing more is obviously a step in understanding, and before you kind of can make more sustainable choices, you need to know more, and you need to understand what your choices imply. Now, quite often the climate impact is indicated in CO2 equivalents, or I've been talking about tons of CO2, carbon footprints of this and that. To most people, that doesn't really actually mean that much. CO2 is, the weight, basically the weight of an invisible gas. The weight of CO2 is used as an indicator for the climate damage that it causes, but that doesn't really say that much. So what we're doing is we're saying it in metrics that people understand better. That is in euros or dollars or whatever currency you happen to use, so that you have a value, you understand how much it causes to clean up after your mess. And that makes it much more comprehensible than just this more abstract kind of CO2. And if you are provided with this information prior to purchase, you still have a chance to choose differently and think twice. Let's for example think of if you have a pair of jeans that you feel that is broken and you need to get a new one. If you would see the climate impact of a pair of new jeans, you might decide to actually let me maybe see if I can repair the old one and still use them. So having that opportunity prior to making the purchase to think twice is super important, and then that can help you to choose more sustainably. But then at the end of the day, as I used my personal example, I'm still causing emissions. I'm still causing way more emissions than would be a sustainable level. So I need tools to take responsibility for those emissions, and compensating or offsetting for them is a good way. But you have to remember that there's always a kind of order or hierarchy in terms of offsetting or compensating emissions. First, you need to avoid causing the emissions. Secondly, you need to minimize if you can't avoid, and compensating is only the last option on your table. So always try to avoid or minimize before you end up compensating. So this is just a quick snapshot of what our service looks like in different types of areas of consumption, booking, for example, Airbnb, or purchasing clothing online, or ordering a taxi, for example. All of these, our product or service can be included into all of these services or many others. So, but what do we do basically with the money that people, if we set a price on carbon, what happens with that? Let me go into that quickly in slightly more detail. So we have a fixed rate for a ton of CO2. Currently it's 28 euros. So if you would be an average Finn and have a 10-ton carbon footprint annually, it would cost you about 280 euros a year to offset your emissions. But we're not just offsetting the emissions on a one-to-one ratio. So if a person causes 1 ton of emissions, we're not taking only 1 ton of CO2 away from the atmosphere. We're actually overcompensating. There are these carbon capture projects around the world where we invest the money. A lot of them are related to forest protection. There's also other ways of capturing carbon from the atmosphere, for example, algae or seagrass. There's also mechanical ways of removing CO2 from the atmosphere. So there's a lot of technologies out there. And we're building a portfolio of different kind of projects where we can find the most sustainable ways of doing it. But as I mentioned, we're not happy with this one-to-one ratio, which would actually mean that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere remains the same. So if one causes 1 ton of emissions, removing that from the atmosphere doesn't really change anything. It doesn't remove carbon from the atmosphere, thus it's not slowing down climate change. So we need to go beyond that conventional way of offsetting and actually overcompensate. And we do that in a way that we try to ensure that always double the amount of the emissions that a purchase of a service or a product has caused is removed from the atmosphere. So if I cause 1 ton of emissions, if I offset through compensate, that would mean that we're removing always at least twice that amount from the atmosphere, thus actually going towards carbon negativity and making a dent in kind of that carbon excess carbon that we already have in the atmosphere. Now, there are many reasons for this overcompensation. One is the historical kind of depth that we have. We have a response. We've already added too much carbon, so we need to remove it. Then there's other reasons as well related to risks, for example, in the projects or carbon calculations. So we try to mitigate those with a significant overcompensation as well. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this market for these carbon capture projects. I would say it's pretty much a wild west out there when it comes to these projects. There are some international standards that try to kind of ensure that the projects are sustainable and they respect human rights and biodiversity as well. And gold standard that's set up by the World Wildlife Fund and VCS is another very well-known standard. So we try to purchase these so-called carbon credits from projects that have these standards, but we've noticed that that's just not enough. So we actually have an independent scientific advisory panel that helps us to identify even better projects and even better technologies. If I give you an example, that we've screened since February over 80 of these projects that all have these very well-known and recognized international standards certificates like Gold Standard or VCS. We've actually only found 2 that meet our requirements and meet our kind of criteria that we've been able to set. So that shows you that there's a lot of uncertainties out there, a lot of projects that are not quite sustainable yet. And even if we've been able to find 2 projects that meet our requirements, we actually buy a significant amount more of these so-called carbon credits than would be technically necessary to provide a double overcompensation. So we still take into account kind of many of the risks that these projects have by overcompensating even more than it would be necessary. So again, we have how we try to make a difference in terms of the project selection is that we have a very close connection to the scientific community through our independent scientific advisory panel that advises us. We have an overcompensation that ensures impact, And we're a non-profit, like I think I mentioned earlier. We're not doing this for business reasons. We do have a business model. We're not a non-governmental organization in that sense, but we're a non-profit, and we channel 100% of the compensation payments that consumers have to buying carbon credits from the market. So we're not taking anything away, or we're not taking kind of any share from that. So, and we fully disclose all payments on our website as well. So again, just to recap, pretty much everything we do still, you know, living normal lives, or even lives that have are more sustainable than others. We're still adding carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but we need tools to start removing that, and compensating our emissions, or overcompensating for your emissions, is a way to move ahead towards this carbon negative future. So we need to understand our impact. We need opportunities to think twice to make more sustainable choices. And at the end of the day, we need to choose wisely. And when we cause emissions, we need to take responsibility for them. And that way we can maybe sort of contribute to the bigger structural changes that we need in society. When people start taking responsibility, I'm sure that more abstract institutions will also follow. But yeah, let me maybe stop here, and happy to answer some questions. And please go ahead and check our Compensate on our different social media channels, and obviously compensate.com online as well. But yeah, I'll stop here and end my presentation, so you can also see me when I try to answer maybe any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. That was I knew it was going to be very insightful, and yeah, it's some big issues there. But thanks very much for that. I'll start with my first question. I was doing a bit of research to kind of be not so unprepared. I was reading a bit of Yuval Harari and Noam Chomsky, so maybe my questions are a bit philosophical and out there, but let's go. So we all knew, at least most of us knew, because you know, a lot of the older people out there don't acknowledge that there's a climate crisis. On this forum, Sustainable Forum, we're all preaching to the church. We all know there's a problem with the climate. With this COVID crisis that came out of the blue, we saw how quickly the skies are able to clear up once we stop putting the carbon into the environment. And you know, we can see how quickly it can happen that the change comes around. So my first question is, how do we reboot the economy in a more sustainable way going forward?
Yeah, that's the big question right now, I think. And if you remember that we're still, like, the emission reductions due to COVID are still far from what we would need in order to kind of truly mitigate the climate crisis as well. So that's the big question, and governments are now investing or redirecting a lot of money towards supporting businesses, for example, that are in trouble. So I would hope that this is kind of it's been a wake-up call for us, for humanity, in a way that we see that big, you know, changes, people are able to adapt to different circumstances quite quickly and surprisingly easily. There's been very little unrest when you think about how big and drastic the changes have been. So I hope that this is a wake-up call, that we're able to change human behavior if necessary when the crisis is big enough. I also hope that this shows that you know, how large I mean, it shows that how much needs to be done to tackle the climate crisis that is even bigger than COVID-19. And I would hope that governments around the world now understand that now it's the time to invest in a green recovery instead of, you know, going back to business as usual. Going back to business as usual means a world where emissions keep growing. So I guess it's it's kind of, yeah, as you mentioned, it's kind of rebooting, if you would think of it as an operating system. Maybe even not rebooting, but actually changing the OS is necessary.
Yeah.
And for in that, I'm not, maybe, I don't know if I'm optimistic or pessimistic in terms of if that's possible or not. But but then again, it doesn't really matter if you're an optimist or pessimist as long as you're trying to drive the necessary change instead of just hoping for it. So
Yeah, because that's the other side of the coin is we've got these results for the climate, but then we see the economy is crashed. So, you know, do we like just turn on the machine how we were full gas to kind of make up for it? Like after 2008, there was an increase in the emissions. So like that's just, we know we can't do that, but that's kind of, hopefully that it is going to happen because in some way, but hopefully, like you said, the governments will give some money to the green sector or innovative technologies and not just give it to airlines and, you know,
yeah, I don't know, this like decoupling of economic growth with emissions. It's often said that it's not possible, but it's never been really tried either. So I think I mean, it's not. I'm not sure if it's possible or not, but at least we should at least try to do it. And I think on an individual level or personal level, this crisis might also show us how much of our consumption is kind of unnecessary as well.
Yeah,
we really need all the kind of crap that we have. Sorry to be blunt.
So could like be a bit of a blessing in disguise if it's the catalyst to spark us, because we weren't just going to do it before, you know. So yeah, hopefully that's the silver lining. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of questions here we've got from our audience. This one's from Emmy Toysku. She says, "Thank you, Mr. Kaskeala, for this presentation. It's great. What do you think is the first thing that individuals should do? And how can one start working in the sustainability field and build a career there?"
Okay, so being active is number one. I mean, don't just limit your sort of climate actions towards the consumption choices you make. You need to be active as well. You need to, otherwise you're just limiting your impact to your own sphere of it. So voting, that's obviously one of the biggest impacts that an individual has, and we have the luxury, us living in democracy, that we can actually impact decision making at the political level. So just being knowledgeable, being active, and sort of be it through politics or in business or whatever, but sort of working for that change and not limiting your actions to an individual level. That's maybe my answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and how to start working, build a clear career there. I just, probably just through your studies and focusing on sustainability issues and trying to land internships and things like that in the field.
Send your CVs to compensate students.
Yeah.
That's great. I've got another question here. It's amazing. Thanks, Nicholas. This is from Eva Weisenes. When I emigrated here 8 years ago, there's kind of public sharing were impossible, these kind of public sharings. Finland is so much behind compared to others, but we're catching up. I think that there is a lack of visibility around existing solutions in the country, and this would help to attract young workers in these fields. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure to what Eva is referring to, but where we are like, yeah, lack of visibility around existing solutions. Maybe if that refers to sort of how proactively, for example, companies communicate what they're doing. I think for some reason, a lot of there's so much stuff, like interesting stuff happening that companies are doing that they're not really communicating in a good way. One I think there's a sort of fear factor there that companies who are, you know, on the one hand innovative and doing something great to reduce emissions or being more sustainable, they might still be kind of locked in that old world of the fossil fuel economy or the fossil economy. So they may be afraid of communicating what they're doing because that might be seen as greenwashing because they're not perfect yet. So I don't know if that question refers to this, but I think for companies, it would be super interesting or super important for them to be communicating proactively and openly what they're doing. If they're still, you know, doing something good with the right hand and something bad with the left hand, they need to be honest and need to be transparent about it. But at least, you know, communicating that they're trying to achieve some sort of change would be important. And through transparency, let consumers decide and reward perhaps companies that are more sustainable than others. I think being honest and transparent is really key.
Okay, and then we've got time for one more question. This is from Bipin Dawadi. We know that consuming less is the best one can do. Does not compensating opinion, or is it a misguiding people that that she means that it gives people a mindset that they can consume as much as they want and then just pay to compensate their way out of it, and everything's going to be all right? Will it be not like washing one's guilt?
Yeah, that's a very valid point, and I think it's it can be true, and it's a risk that exists. I think that's why it's essential to design a model where compensating is something that increases your awareness and understanding about the decisions that you take, and being also very sort of vocal in saying that compensating is not the, you know, silver bullet that we need here. It's the last option on the menu. You always need to be able to avoid and minimize emissions before you compensate. So that's really key. But yeah, that risk is definitely there. We just need to recognize it. Although I would say that, you know, if you meet people who compensate you, it would be quite rare to meet someone it would be rare to meet someone who is just doing it to kind of washing one's guilt and paying for the sins. That actually usually it works, that it raises awareness from where your emissions are actually coming from, and you know, the next time you make that decision to buy or a service or a product, you might think twice that, okay, is this really necessary or not? When it comes to businesses that offset their emissions, we have studies that prove that businesses that offset emissions have more or do more in terms of reducing their emissions as well. So yeah, you need to recognize that risk is available, but you also need to address it in a way, or mitigate that risk, and design services that sort of push you towards making more sustainable choices and not just paying for or washing for your guilt.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's all we have time for. Vivi, how are we doing there? You want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Niklas, for that. Was very interesting. Our time is unfortunately running up, so now we hope you fill out the feedback form in order to us evaluate the event. And if you feel like you have something more to ask or you want to comment more, feel free to do so in the comments or in the feedback form. In behalf of myself and this team, we want to thank you all for your time and your participation. We hope you enjoyed this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And please fill the feedback form.
The feedback form can be also found in the chat.